On the day Vito Corleone's daughter is to be wed, a special tradition is held for mafia figures. Vito Corleone was one of the most important figures in the mob world at his peak, and it was a ritual that no Sicilian can refuse a request on his daughter's wedding day. As the wedding was happening, we saw numerous requests from different guests and friends of the Don, but the most striking and serious was the one by Amerigo Bonasera. The Sicilian requested his for the two men who beat his daughter up to be whacked, but Don Vito could not fulfill this request. Instead, Vito implied something else will happen to these men. But after this initial meeting with Bonasera, there is no mention of these men getting roughed up. So the question we will answer is, what actually happens to Bonasera's attackers? Did they get off the hook? Let's dive into it. In the opening scene of The Godfather, we see a Sicilian undertaker begging for justice. Not long before this, Bonasera was sitting in the New York criminal court and was waiting for vengeance on the young men who hurt his daughter. The judge looked at the men and said, "You acted like the worst kind of degenerates and behaved like wild beasts in a jungle." The two were lucky they didn't go any further, or they would have been put behind bars for 20 years, the judge stated. Bonasera was liking where this was going, thinking justice would be served, but because of their youth, clean records, and fine families, vengeance was not to be sought by the judge. Instead of being charged to 3 years to confinement, the sentence was suspended and the two men went free. Bonasera looked on in overwhelming hatred and frustration. His daughter was still recovering in the hospital with a broken jaw, and now Bonasera had to watch the happy parents gather around their son celebrating. As the parents were passing by him, Bonasera leaned over and told them that they would weep as he had, and so would their sons. Embarrassed and upset, Bonasera turned to his wife and said, "For justice, we must go to Don Corleone." Bonasera was a long-time acquaintance of Vito Corleone, but unlike many other residents of the Little Italy neighborhood, he denied accepting the Don's friendship. Not wanting the word to get out, he was in debt to the mafia. He avoided the Don, even though Vito's wife is godmother to his daughter. Vito scolded him for this, and his request of murdering on his daughter's wedding day, but reluctantly agreed to grant Bonasera a favor of justice in return for friendship. Vito wanted reliable people to carry out this task, and entrusted this deed to his caporegime, Peter Clemenza. Upon hearing the instructions, Clemenza gave this task to one of his soldiers, Paoli Gatto. Gatto, who, as we know, ends up betraying the family, was assigned this quick job to take care of. Gatto wasn't too fond of these quickie jobs, especially when they included violence. Rather, he liked to plan things ahead, but these were the circumstances. Pauli sipped his beer as he watched the two punks making out with the two girls at the bar. Pauli knew everything about the two punks. Their names were Jerry Wagner and Kevin Moonin. They were both around 20 years of age, good-looking, brown-haired, tall, and well-built. They were leaving for college in a few weeks, which meant this deed had to be done prior to them leaving. Clemenza had given Gatto the mugshots of the two men, and where they went drinking every night. But Gatto had to be careful. He could not approach the two if they were walking out with girls or any other civilian. This had to be handled in a particular way to ensure no one was in the crossfires. On this particular night, Pauli heard the ladies tell the two guys there was no way they were going home with them. They had heard about the incident with Bonasera's daughter and wanted no part in their antics. After hearing this, Pauli knew this was the night and walked out into the night street. By now, it was midnight, and only one other bar showed life, and the precinct car was tipped off by Clemenza, so there would be no trouble. Pauli turned to a 4-door Chevy sedan and told the two large men in the back to take them when they come out. These two men were ex-boxers who had been set up with a little loan sharking action to earn a decent living, and they were anxious to express their gratitude to the Corleones. Once the two punks walked out of the bar, the skinny-looking Paulie said, "Hey, Casanova, those broads really brushed you off?" They looked back with delight and immediately pounced on him, but right before they found themselves in some trouble. They found their arms pinned by the two ex-boxers, and at the same moment, Paulie slipped on a specially made set of brass knuckles onto his right hand. As you can imagine, things started to get graphic. After Gatto got his lick in, he went to the car and waited as his men proceeded to carry out this task. The instructions from Clemenza were no blows on the top or the back of the head. There was to be no accidental fatality, but besides that, it was fair game. Gatto looked back briefly after getting in the car and could barely recognize Kevin's face. After finishing with the first guy, the men turned to Wagner, clubbing him to his knees as he was trying to get away. A few people came out of the bar and saw the situation. This didn't stop the strong arms as they continued to do a number on the guy, and after more people came out of the bar, Paulie yelled to them to stop. They quickly got in the car, and the sedan went off in the dark night with the two men lying there in agony. Shortly after this task was taken out, there was a phone call to the Corleones. Tom Hagen picked up the phone, and on the other end, Bonasera's voice was trembling with gratitude. He told Tom he expressed his undying friendship to the Don and would lay down his life to the blessed Godfather. The Daily News carried a middle page of the two guys who attacked Bonasera's daughter lying in the street. The photos were nothing short of gruesome, and both of them would be in the hospital for months and required plastic surgery. Now, after this, Bonasera was to be indebted to the Don for a service later down the line, if it was needed. Just before he was leaving for work, he received a phone call. On the other end was Tom Hagen saying, "I'm calling for Don Corleone at his request." He immediately felt his stomach go sick and was almost in disbelief that the Don himself was coming to see him at his funeral parlor. While he waited, he anxiously lit up a cigarette and awaited the Corleone arrival. He thought about the many scenarios that could happen, and his mind was filled with pessimistic outcomes. At once, he heard the tires on the gravel outside and got up to open the rear door. Clemenza was the first one to come in, carrying a stretcher with a corpse swaddled in a gray blanket. And then, from the blackness of the yard, another man stepped into the lighted office room, the Don. Bonasera was surprised to see the Don come with the body of his son, Sonny Corleone. Vito called for Bonasera to perform the embalming of Sonny and make his body presentable for the open casket. He obliged to the Don's request, and so the debt was settled. And that's the video. Thanks for tuning in. Did you know this actually happened? Comment below your thoughts about this moment from the book. Don't forget to like and subscribe.